Welcome in the podcast The Instant When. The Taittinger House reinvents famous fairy tales. Let yourself be carried away by the magic of Christmas. Every week, discover our podcast inspired by famous tales and the magic of the holiday season.
The Snow Queen. The helicopter was now just a little black dot in the blue December sky, moving further and further away. On the ground, the two archaeologists smiled as they watched it disappear into the distance. Gerda, with fine blonde ringlets peeking out of her turquoise woolen hat, turned towards Kay. "We're all alone then," said the young man with hazel-coloured eyes, his mid-length hair floating behind him in the breeze. "Are you frightened?" asked Gerda playfully. "Frightened? No way. I've been waiting for this for 2 years. Come on then," she said, starting to pick her way across the frozen wasteland that stretched ahead of them. As he followed her, Kay thought back to the start of their adventure. They'd been childhood friends before becoming colleagues, and then leading expeditions together all over the world. From the Amazonian jungle to African savannas, they were guided by a single and unique desire to uncover the secrets of past civilizations. But for some time now, funding had increasingly been allocated to projects for the future rather than archaeology, which was considered archaic and obsolete. So when a mystery benefactor contacted them and offered to fund a pioneering expedition, Gerda and Kay had accepted without asking too many questions, especially since their curiosity had been aroused by their new employer. They'd first met him 2 years ago in his luxury villa located on the European side of the Bosporus, in Istanbul. The plan was simple. He'd fund the entire trip all the way to the Arctic Cordillera, and in exchange, Gerda and Kay would bring him back a legendary artifact, the Mirror of Souls. Over the years, this artifact had become a bit of a joke in the scientific community. No one knew if it really existed or if its legend was fabricated. Several other expeditions had preceded them, but the explorers would always come back empty-handed. If they came back, that is. The main reason Kay had accepted this mission was simply to travel with Gerda again. As for the young woman, she was willing to risk everything to achieve her goals. For her, the past was essential to understanding the future, and that motivated her more than anything. They'd been walking in the mountains for 4 hours, completely cut off from everything. Gerda was up ahead. She turned around to speak to Kay, her eyelashes coated with a fine layer of snow. "The weather is turning," she called above the harsh wind. "We've got to get over this pass before we get caught in the storm." She pointed to the direction they needed to take. Kay nodded and quickened his pace. As they tried to approach the spot, they were continually pushed back by violent gusts of wind. They doubled over to resist the wind before being blown backwards. "If it was any stronger, we'd have been done for," puffed Gerda breathlessly. Frozen from the cold, Kay struggled to pull his GPS out of his jacket. "We still have to walk another 20 kilometres to get to the Bay of Baffin before we see Elif." Elif was the island where the mirror was last seen. 20 kilometres? Is that all?" Kay smiled at his friend's joke and helped her get up. Just then, a sinister cracking reverberated around the mountain. They looked up and saw a huge section of ice break away from the cliff face. Kay and Gerda threw themselves to one side, narrowly escaping being crushed by the ice. "That was close," said Kay, his hair powdered with snow. He'd just finished his sentence when the ground started to crack open beneath their feet. A huge crevasse split the ice corridor they were on. A rushing tumult of water surged up between the fissures, carrying away the ice block that Gerda and Kay were standing on. "Hold on!" cried the young woman as their makeshift raft was swept away by the current. Around them, entire walls of ice fell away and crashed into the river. Each impact threatened to capsize their ice raft. About 100 meters ahead, Kay suddenly saw a mound of rocks arched above the water.
As soon as we're close, jump up onto the rocks, okay?
Gerda nodded, fear in her eyes. Kay was the first to jump. He narrowly managed to grab a tree root sticking out of the rocks and pulled himself onto the ridge. Gerda was frozen with terror. The floating ice block was rapidly moving her away from the safety of the rocks.
Jump!
Shouted Kay with all his strength. His voice startled Gerda into action and she leapt. But she couldn't get a firm grip on the rocks, and Kay watched in horror as she started to slip into the void. He threw himself to the ground and managed to grab hold of her wrist just in time. The two friends looked at each other in shock before Kay managed to pull Gerda up. She tried to speak, but she was shaking.
You saved your life,
Finished Kay.
It's true,
He added cheekily.
You owe me big time.
Gerda laughed at her teammate's smugness.
We've just started. There'll be plenty of opportunities for me to save you back.
She smacked his shoulder in thanks and looked around. Behind them was a lush forest, thick with trees and wild, colourful plants.
It's strange to see vegetation like this at such high altitude,
said the young woman. Kay joined her, GPS in hand.
True, but according to this map, if we go through the forest, it's a shortcut to the island of Elif. Okay then, let's do it.
Apprehensively, they entered the woods. They were soon enveloped in darkness.
Are you sure you know where we are?
Asked Gerda anxiously. Kay checked their position again.
I'm beginning to worry,
he admitted.
I think we've been going round and round in circles.
Gerda considered.
Our destination is due west. We just have to follow the sun and keep going, whatever happens. Yeah, but the forest is so dense, it's not going to be an easy thing. But we can try.
They progressed slowly, climbing over tree trunks, ducking under branches, and clambering over huge rocks. After several hours, they were covered in bites and scratches. Losing patience, Gerda angrily pushed through a thorny bush and at last spotted the sea in the distance.
We found it! The way out!
She called to Kay, who was still behind her. Surprised not to hear him reply, she looked around. She was horrified to see Kay bound and gagged by thick vine branches. She rushed over to try and free him, but the more she pulled, the more tightly the plant wrapped itself around him. Kay was beginning to suffocate when Gerda remembered the ice axe attached to her bag. She grabbed it and struck the ivy with all her force. It pulled back instantly, and Kay was able to breathe again.
Are you okay?
Asked Gerda urgently. Before he could respond, they felt the whole forest shudder around them.
Quick, get up. We've got to get out of here.
Kay followed her without hesitation, and they ran towards the exit. But the path was blocked by branches. Gerda frantically chopped the branches with the ice axe and made a path through. Just as Kay was reaching his friend, a vine whipped itself around his ankle and dragged him backwards.
Go!
He shouted to Gerda. But she ignored him and jumped onto the plant, ripping it from her companion's foot. Following their survival instincts, they got up quickly and found their way out of the forest just before the path closed up again. Bent over, hands on her knees to get her breath back, Gerda looked at the young man, whose face was white as a sheet.
We're even,
she told him.
To say the least. And there's also some good news. Oh, is there? If so, I'd be delighted to hear it. Look up.
Kay lifted his head and saw the Bay of Baffin, a huge expanse of frozen water that stretched as far as the eye could see. The motionless waves had been solidified, as if the sea had frozen over in a matter of seconds. Kay couldn't believe his eyes. It's incredible. Looking at him, Gerda found herself moved by his emotion. "Let's make use of the moonlight to carry on our journey," she said at last. Carefully, they stepped onto the sea of ice. The star-strewn sky was reflected onto its surface, and they felt as if they were moving between the stars. They skated along in silence until they saw the island of Elif outlined on the horizon.
"Finally, we made it,"
whispered Gerda. Filled with a renewed sense of hope, they entered the sanctuary via a path that had rarely been walked by man. Frozen in time and ice, the landscape was immaculately white. As they approached the heart of the island, the Arctic cold pierced their bones.
"It's strange,"
said Kay.
"The GPS says we should be in front of a sort of temple, but there's nothing here."
Feeling disheartened at this setback, Gerda sat down on the icy ground.
"We shouldn't have come here. We've almost run out of water. We don't know if this mirror even exists, and I'm really, really cold,"
she said, closing her eyes. Kay crouched down beside her.
"No, don't fall asleep. Not now. Come on, let's find shelter over there."
He helped her stand and walk over to a cavity in the cliff. Once inside, they switched on their torches and saw that the cave was actually a tunnel leading into the mountain.
"Let's keep going. We'll be sheltered from the cold,"
said Kay encouragingly. Supporting his best friend, they headed into the mountain. As they advanced, they noticed the walls turn a pale blue, lighting up the way ahead. Soon they no longer needed their torches, and Gerda felt her strength return. They carried on for a while and reached a turning which brought them into a hall so vast that it was difficult to make out its edges. In the centre, an ice palace shimmered with 1,000 lights. Mesmerized by this magical sight, the two explorers silently approached the snow castle. Once they'd entered its gigantic doors, Kay and Gerda found themselves in a magnificent room decorated with huge, ivory-coloured sculptures. On long tables by the walls, silverware was piled high with all kinds of delicacies. A clementine parfait embellished with white chocolate caught Gerda's eye. Across the hall, at the top of an immaculate staircase, they saw a mirror held in a glass stand.
"So it really does exist,"
whispered Kay. Gerda walked over to it and carefully tried to lift the mirror. She was about to caress its mother-of-pearl encrusted frame when a gust of wind came out of nowhere, and a mass of air swirled in front of her before transforming into a woman with an opaline face and eyes the colour of sapphires.
"You are about to take possession of a powerful artifact with evil powers,"
declared the guardian of the object.
"Are you even aware of this?"
Petrified by this apparition, Gerda was speechless.
"You may take it if you wish,"
continued the Queen,
"but it is at your own risk and peril."
She took a step backwards and looked at Gerda with her icy gaze. The archaeologist thought for a moment and once again stretched out her hand towards the mirror.
"Wait!"
cried Kay, rushing to her side.
"Are you sure you want to do this?"
"Kay, this relic is our only hope. If we come back with nothing, our careers will be in tatters."
"So what? Are you prepared to risk everything for this?"
"I don't understand. I thought that's why you'd come here too."
"Of course I did. But if it meant putting our own lives in danger, I'd give up the relic without hesitation."
Gerda stared into his hazel eyes and remembered everything they'd gone through together. Their story, their arguments, their fits of laughter. Kay walked towards her, put his hand on hers, and gently led her away from the mirror.
"You're right,"
Gerda said.
"There are more important things."
She turned towards the Queen, who was watching them carefully.
Sorry to have disturbed you, Your Majesty. We're going to leave now.
Gerda and Kay were about to go when suddenly thousands of snowflakes surrounded the being. Little by little, she was transformed into a beautiful woman with an angelic face. The ice melted away from her body, revealing glowing skin. She was cloaked in an elegant midnight blue dress. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at them gratefully.
Thanks to your wisdom, you have broken the curse. You have set me free. I wish to thank you.
And she touched their foreheads lightly. Kay and Gerda let her do so, before everything faded away.
Excuse me,
Kay called to the waitress walking past.
I'd like 2 glasses of your finest champagne, please. Of course, sir.
With a boyish grin, he turned to Gerda.
This is definitely worth celebrating.
I still can't believe it,
she said.
She gave us her memories. Thanks to her, we own memories that go back centuries. Do you realise what this means?
That we're the luckiest pair of archaeologists in the world?
That's putting it mildly.
The waitress returned and handed them 2 glasses of champagne with a mineral and floral bouquet. Kay and Gerda looked at each other for a moment, and then, smiling, they toasted eternal gratitude to past civilizations. The end.
If you want to listen to more podcasts, please check our blog, theinstantwhen.taittinger.fr, to learn more. Our podcasts are also available from all podcast platforms. See you next week for the next fairy tale.